The conversation you are about to hear was recorded in 2020 during the height of the global pandemic. And now, Global Comedy Studios presents, Is This a Bad Time to Talk?
All right, it is July 13th, 2020, Monday night. I'm at Simple Studios. And I'm about to call Susan Messing, who has done so much in the world of improvisation and theater in Chicago, Improv Olympic, Blue Velveeta, Second City, The Annoyance, founding member, amazing person, phenomenal improviser, good human being. So let me give her a call right now, and I'm very excited to talk to her because I haven't talked to someone in a while. But here we go. Hello?
Hello.
Is this Susan Messing?
This is she.
Hi, this is Ali. Is this a bad time to talk?
No, Ali, this is a good time to talk.
Thank you for taking my call, Susan. Not everybody does.
Well, you know, Ali, you've called a couple times today to set this up, so it's pretty good.
Rule of threes. This is the third time.
That is true.
So right now I'm in New York City. There's a fire truck going by, and I'm at Simple Studios rehearsal space, which we have to surrender in the next 15 days after 11 years. Where am I finding you?
You're finding me in Chicago on my back porch, and the cicadas are singing. Do you hear that?
I do. Every 17 years, is that right?
That's, you know, I'm from New Jersey, and that is, I think it was every 7 years in New Jersey, but for some reason, Chicago likes to up it, so we have them every year.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, cool. Well, good. So basically, you know, Susan, I've known you for a while, and I've seen you perform. Yeah, a bit. I would say 30 years, maybe, close to 30.
Yeah, a little more than that, probably.
And I think the first time I saw you perform was, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the Southern Comfort Comedy Challenge on the main stage of the Second City.
Now, Ali, you know I can't say I performed at, I was a performer of Second City with that competition. I performed at Second City with that competition.
That's right.
That's what Joyce used to say. You can't put that on your resume. Eventually, later on, I could.
Right. But that was the first time I saw, I found out they were having this event. I just moved to Chicago, and, I was there. In fact, I was there. The reason I moved to Chicago was to take classes, a writing class with the late, great Michael McCarthy.
I've heard of him.
Yes. Rest in peace. I mean, a mensch, I would be remiss if I didn't mention him early and often, but I know, and, my condolences. We talked a little bit about this morning. But he was the reason I moved to Chicago to take his class, and that launched whatever I was going to do. But then I came that night, and I saw you with that group, Dorff, Stack, McCann, Leggett, Blondell.
No Stack, unfortunately.
No Stack. He wasn't.
Stack was in a group called, I think, Bouquet of Flesh. I might be wrong. Ask him. I was on a team called Blue Velveeta with Dorff and Leggett and Mitch Rouse and Brendan Sullivan. McCann joined us later, so it was probably around the time he was with us. And Blondell, who else? Who am I missing? Tommy Booker.
Right.
That's it.
But, I mean, watching it that night, I mean, I don't know if I'd seen some Second City Improv at that point, and I might have come to see you guys at Papa Milano's, but, that night was like, you guys won, and it was an amazing night of improv, and it really, I don't know, kind of made me think, like, what was possible.
Yeah, except that, that was how the Herald was presented to me at the time, which was a competition. And it was only about 5 years old when I started, because I started in 1986 when I graduated Northwestern. And it was, you competed against another team, which even at that time I thought was very odd. And we had these, do you remember this? That there were these, I guess there was kind of like a scorecard, and how great did the team work on the team, and teamwork and intelligence and something else. God knows what the scorecard had. But I thought even at the time it was kind of weird because it was almost like apples versus oranges. That's not a better fruit, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's,
You sort of drop that after a while.
Yeah, and I think that's for the best. I mean, I think healthy competition is good. It makes people want to be better. But I agree it's strange to kind of, judge improv by who's better. But, yeah. But let me ask you this. When you were younger, at what point did you realize that you liked to play make-believe, or someone encouraged you to be like, you should do something in the performing arts?
I always wanted to do make-believe. That was just the way my brain worked. I made up stuff all the time. And so I thought, well, I guess that means, when I was little, I think I wanted to be either an actor, a hockey goalie, or a swimming coach. And there's no way I was going to be a hockey goalie, and swimming coach. I don't know where I got that one, but very quickly I thought I wanted to be an actor, and then I ended up at Northwestern. I was a theater major, and I was still a bad actor even at Northwestern. They had a nice little loophole that they couldn't kick you out of the program for a lack of talent. But if you were good at something like sewing, look at that, you should go to the costume shop. You're great at that. They didn't do that to me. So I left almost as bad as when I started. I think I was unintentional comedy. If you saw me do Shakespeare, you'd go, ooh, not so good. So when I discovered improv, which was my sophomore year, I auditioned for a show called The Meow Show, which was the comedy show, which I did not get in. And the director of The Meow Show that year was a man named Dan Patterson, who ended up creating a show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's just a little fun fact. And then I also auditioned for something downtown in Chicago at a place called Improv Olympic. I auditioned for a college team, and Colbert was in my year, and he got in, and a bunch of other people, and I did not. So improv was something that was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't until after I graduated when I was just like, now what am I going to do? Because I want to create, but I don't want to create the way that I had been, because I just wasn't grasping that acting thing very well. So I started at the Improv Olympic, which ended up becoming the IO. And yes, we were sued by the Olympic Committee because they had nothing better to do. So for the name. So I started at IO, the Improv Olympic, in 1986, and I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. I was like, I couldn't believe that it existed. I knew in the back of my mind sort of what it was in college, but certainly not in the way that all of a sudden this kind of world opened up to me, and I was like, holy shit, what is this? You know what I mean?
I do. I had the exact same feeling when I got up on stage and improvised for the first time in a class. But along the way, when you were younger, was there a teacher or a coach or someone who championed you? You could shout out to be like, well, this person said you should really do this. Along your, elementary school and high school time in New Jersey.
I think I had chutzpah. I don't think I was very talented in high school, but I got cast a lot in things. I was artistic. My mom had sent us to a fine arts camp in Lenox, Massachusetts, called Belfour Terrace, which was an incredible introduction to the arts. So I think I always knew I wanted to be in the arts. I just didn't know, and so I was surrounded by people who supported that, in a basic way. My whole summers, 8 weeks every summer, was spent in that. You're going to have me being interviewed right now. I have a dog. I have 2 dogs.
Wonderful.
Yes, my dogs did not encourage me. But I was certainly given opportunities that a lot of people might not have had simply by just having it in my sphere. It was as you go to the dentist, you take violin class. You know what I mean? You just do it. So I was very grateful. My mom certainly encouraged us in that direction, but she did not say this would be a vocation. Certainly not. I think she was just too polite to tell me not to pursue it.
And was it a funny family? Was everybody making each other laugh or doing bits?
My dad was the funniest person I'd ever met. Dry humor, super dry. You almost had to look at him again to see if he was joking. but probably easily the funniest person I've ever met in my whole life. Really funny. My mom said later on they had a bad divorce, but my mom had said that was one of the first things that got her, because he was hysterical, dry. Yeah, my dad. And it also alleviated a lot of tension in our household in terms of the divorce when I would sort of, do something like, do something funny. That helped. I was the last child. The last child gets to do that kind of thing, don't they?
So in a way, you were using laughter to kind of, help your family get through this, but that's where maybe your first audiences were, making them laugh and lightening the load.
Yes, that is a great way to put it. Certainly, somebody, was it you who told me somebody? Oh, I was talking to my friend Mark this morning, who was saying that he believes that most comedians are broken in some way, which I was just like, oh, dear, was I broken? I always feel that broken people can be fixed, but not always, apparently. But, it was definitely an easy, I understood people who had a good comic sensibility better than probably someone who was going to explain something very dryly to me. So, yes, it was definitely in my DNA.
Well, I personally, I think everyone's broken. There's no way to get through 7th and 8th grade without being broken. It's just, I think some of us deal with it differently.
Well, sometimes with certain people, it's their peak. So God bless and Godspeed, right?
Yeah. And so what took you from New Jersey to Northwestern?
The summer between my junior and senior year, I did something called the National High School Institute, which is at Northwestern. They also call it the Cherub program. And I was a theater cherub. My mother had been a journalist cherub many years before me. And so that is how I came to the Midwest. I had no idea Northwestern existed. When you're from the East Coast, you think of East Coast schools, and then maybe perhaps you end up at Stanford. I don't know. But for the most part, I thought that was, this amazing new world of Chicago. And when I applied to school, Northwestern was definitely the top of my list.
So your mother's the one who turned you on to that program. That's how you found out about it.
Yeah, and it was incredible. And I think it might have helped me greatly get into Northwestern. Now, apparently, it's very incredibly difficult to get into Northwestern. I think my grades were good, my SATs were shit. But, yeah.
So when you got there to Northwestern, when was like the first time you found out about Second City and that world, or did you already know about SCTV and Second City at that point?
Yeah, I grew up on the original cast of, this will date me, I grew up on the original cast of SNL, and SCTV was just like this. I think when people discovered SCTV, when they're at home and they're like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? Just because it was definitely like a more twisted and perverse version of something like an SNL where it was character-based the whole time, and I just remember staring at it thinking it's so bizarre. And I knew that Second City existed, but even when I started improvising, it was not the goal of mine, because when I looked at the main stage of Second City, I didn't think that there was a place for me, because it seemed a little more typified at the time. You'd have the big guy, the tall. My husband would be probably white guy, disenfranchised white guy. You know what I mean? So there was always it seemed like everybody had a type, and I didn't think that I fit in it. There was always a woman who made herself look really, goofy looking, and then there was one who was more of a straight-laced character, and I thought, I don't know if I'm goofy enough to be goofy, and I don't think I'm pretty enough to be pretty. I don't know. And, 12 years later, I landed on main stage, but that's another story. So
we'll get
Second
to that.
City was it was definitely in my vision, but I just didn't think that was a place that would take me. So I was there. I took all the classes you could take at Second City in their conservatory program, and I had obviously done I.O., and by then we had started a theater called the Annoyance Theater, and so once I'd been in this community for a long, long time and had gone back and forth to L.A. as well, to have the opportunity to be at Second City was a really big deal for me in terms of my education. So I got to do that too.
And when you first started seeing shows at Second City, who was on the stages there that you saw, that you were inspired by?
Steve Assad. I want to say maybe Joel Murray at the time. I don't know if he was touring or on main stage. I was watching the generation right before me was like Mick and Rosowski and Pasquesi and Timmy Meadows, and Farley was with us at I.O., Improv Olympic, and then sort of was Adele from Improv Olympic to kind of tour for a minute and then be put on main stage. So he was probably the first person of like one of my generation friends to kind of be in that world. And then I remember going to see all those shows. And actually Mick was directing a lot of Second City Northwest shows. And I remember en masse, the whole Annoyance community would go and support him and everyone else in the shows. But it still didn't seem like something I'd be doing. It'd be something I was supporting.
And who along the way were some instructors that really inspired you and nurtured you, and are there things that they taught you that you can, nuggets of wisdom you can pass along or that you use in your own teaching?
Well, Mick, I would say Mick's comic sensibilities made the most sense to me. I feel like Del didn't teach me as much as he affirmed to me. Would say I just knew tacitly when he approved of me, and that just kind of gave me a lot of confidence because I don't think he really showed a lot of that kind of support that often. So when he did, I was just like, what? I can continue doing this? So that was nice. When Michael Gelman felt inspired, like when he would do theater works, not necessarily at Second City, I felt like he was more a cog in a machine there. But at theater works, he seemed just his direction was outstanding. So I enjoyed him there. Don DePaulo, I think, was one of my earlier teachers, and he just seemed very joyful. There were a lot of teachers who were not that happy to teach even when I was young. And you could sort of sense who they were. They were sort of assigned to you, and you just kind of gritted your teeth and tried to remember that the messenger is not always the message, and would continue on. One of them took rolled up newspaper and would hit us in some sort of competitive game on a Saturday morning. And I'm like, I'm here at Second City at 10 in the morning on a Saturday morning. It's got to show that I'm interested in this stuff. You don't have to hit me with a rolled up newspaper. And I remember leaving that class thinking, one day maybe I'll be a teacher and I won't hit people with a rolled up newspaper.
Who did this? Who did this?
I'm not gonna.
Okay. I thought you said it, but you cut out for a second. So I'm not asking you to name names, but there was there's a little glitch where you came out. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
That's look at that self-censorship. But that teacher, if I felt that it would be in support of the world, I would have mentioned this person, but it's negligible. I wouldn't have asked if I hadn't heard a glitch in there was a gap in the in the connection, so I thought you'd said it, but I didn't hear it. No.
Okay, good.
But even negative reinforcement sort of taught me. I mean, Sharna and I will argue this till our dying day, but she was horrific to me, and negative reinforcement didn't work on me. I went home crying every night after her class, and again, we joke about it now. We were on a panel about a year ago where we were like crying. We were laughing so hard because we disagreed with each other so much, but because we love each other now. But I remember thinking, if I ever teach, and that's weird too because I never thought I'd be a teacher. I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to teach that way. It's so rude. It's so rude for me to say that. But I guess even in the negative messages, I really gleaned a lot. But I would say Nick was super positive in the sense that I got the feeling that, and I don't think this was something that he said. It was just something that was implied, which is if you're on a stage, you belong there. You know what I mean? And I thought, so there was something in me that thought, wow, I really have to make this time mean something. You know what I mean? Because I'm there now. I get to create. Now what? And then you get to look at the people around you and think, holy shit, these are just remarkable humans. You know, I mean, don't you look back sometimes and think, I can't believe we got to do what we did with who we got to do it with. It's just insane.
Truly. And still, I still feel that way.
Still. Yep, I do too. So we were very fortunate. I feel like it was a weird little golden age of comedy, where the clubhouse was still really, really small. So we all sort of invested in each other as human beings. And as these institutions got larger and larger and became a little more codified and solidified, it made me sad that a lot of people didn't always have that sense that we had. Not that it was always great. Please don't get me wrong. It wasn't always great. But I definitely feel like got your back came from a really strong sense of, no, really, I have your back.
It's interesting. I'm listening to you, and there's things that you're saying that resonate so much to me. But I'm also curious at stuff like when you see someone like a Chris Farley, do you know at that point like this guy is pretty amazing?
You know what? It's interesting about Chris because yes, I always knew that he had massive he just had chutzpah and balls and charm, and he was so sweet. But because in so many ways I felt he was so tormented, from the very beginning, that kind of mega talent to me did not feel like it was an amazing thing because he just seemed to struggle so much in other areas of his life. So I didn't think to myself, wow, I want to do that. I want to, I remember even when he first came home, after his first season of SNL, he came home for one of I think it was Sharna's 10th anniversary, and he took a Greyhound bus to get home to Chicago to support her. And I guess a bunch of people on his team were not very kind to him. They really gave him a lot of shit. And I was like, oh my God, you're going to be mad at him because he came back to support our place? I couldn't understand. I guess now if I look back at it, I go, oh, that's simple jealousy? ? I don't know. But it made me sad for him. And yeah. Chris was a great guy. And since we get to know everybody when they start versus, this kind of crazy success, I think we just know our friends and we support them through whatever struggles and growing pains that can happen with that kind of stuff. It's also a different world right now. I mean, my friend Larry used to represent, regular actors over at William Morris, and now he reps YouTube stars, and it's just a different way. And also, I remember saying to my daughter, sure, you can get famous from killing a busload of children. If fame is not the be all and the end all on this gig. It's being able to create your art. And if a bunch of people like it, well, then maybe more people will know what you do. But other than that, I don't know. It's never been my goal. So, I don't know.
What I tell my daughters is fame, other people give you, success you give yourself. And fame can be taken away, but the success will always be there.
You know how when your kids are little and taking a shower is almost like a spa vacation? You know what I mean? You're like, oh my God, keeping people alive is rough. I remember just saying in the shower, I can't believe I get to be doing exactly what I want to do with exactly who I want to be doing it with. And that, to me, was my idea of success. I don't know. It just always has been. And even now, with all these institutions sort of burning to the ground, I'm not exactly sure what I'll be doing, and I guess I'll just have to wing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, which came first, the annoyance for you or Improv Olympic?
Improv Olympic, that's where I started.
That's where you started.
When I was taking classes at Improv Olympic, Mick was working with a bunch of people, especially out of University of Indiana, IU, with a bunch of people, and he created something called Metroform. And a bunch of us would come every week and would just improvise weird shit. Like there were directors, I think Pete Gardner was one, Noah was one, and he would just take a bunch of people and just, okay, your theme is clown, create a form. And we'd say, what is that? He'd say, figure it out. And so we would work with Noah or whoever was our director that week, and we would create weird shit. And then they created something called Splatter Theater, and which was brilliant. And then I came in on Splatter Theater 2, and we lost our space very, very quickly. And with about 10 of the people left from Splatter 2 that Mick could, handle at the time, he said, I want to create a show called Co-Ed Prison Sluts. It's going to take place in a prison, a co-ed prison. I want my dog Kahlua in it. I want there to be tap dancing. I want there to be a fight between a drag queen and a clown. And I said, okay. And so I did that show and have been involved with them ever since. And so Metroform became the Annoyance.
Uh-huh. And now I used to hear like the Annoyance you would lock into the theater for like a weekend to come up with shows. Is that apocryphal or true?
There was one show. What the hell was that called? Damn it! There's so many of them. That there was a lock-in for one show, but it wasn't something we normally did. It was like a special thing, and within a weekend they'd come up with a brand new show, and I was like, holy shit, that was brilliant. I was not in that one. Maddie Walsh was in it, Scotty Robinson, Flannery was in it. They were doctors. I can't remember what it was called. We always had weird names. So if I saw the list on like an old Annoyance T-shirt, I'd spot it and go, ugh, I've got to call Ellie and tell him. But it wasn't a normal gig, no.
And you guys are doing Co-Ed Prison Sluts. That's like the longest running show in Chicago every week for a while.
We did it for, I think it was 11 years, every week. It was, for a while, the longest running musical in Chicago. I mean, I don't think the legitimate theater would recognize it, but we were, yeah. Mm-hmm. I left in and out, after a while, because I think after about 6 years of playing the new girl in prison, I was like, not feeling so new anymore. So I would come back occasionally.
And so, you're at IO, you're doing how does Blue Velveeta happen, at IO?
Blue Velveeta happened in the sense that I always was put on a team that was always broken up, and it was called the Blind Faith team. Anytime Sharna has on an old Improv Olympic kind of lineup, if it says Blind Faith, that means she threw a bunch of people together to see what would stick. It was the last team put together and the first team to be broken up. And I felt like my first year I was put on a bunch of Blind Faith teams. And then she created these teams with letters on it. There were the A team, the B team, the C team, and the D team. We were the D team. The B team was Fish Stick. The A team was Mockingbird. Don't remember what C was, but we were D. We gave ourselves the name Blue Velveeta, and our coach was this guy named Nick Napier. So we got into shipshape pretty damn quickly. We also had an incredible work ethic, like a crazy-ass work ethic. So that definitely, and at that time I think Nick was doing Splatter Theater, because I remember rehearsing on the stage. In Splatter Theater, the entire theater starts out white, and by the end of the show, it's just covered in blood. So I remember leaning up against a flat, rehearsing, and just coming off with stickiness. So that was Blue Velveeta. That was the start of Blue Velveeta.
And when you say you had an incredible work ethic, does that just mean you guys were rehearsing a lot with Mick throughout the week?
Yeah, Mick is just very good at streamlining what's important. So there was no wasted time. So I can't imagine us rehearsing a couple times a week. But I do remember, me places where we'd sit around and talk about comedy. What was it? Mm-hmm. Underneath the Wacker Drive, Billy Goat Tavern. They would pick us there because Belushi went there. Trying to kind of glean traditional comedy, Chicago comedy. The guys dragged me in, and I was a willing participant, very, very willing. And I think I always wanted to be an integral part of a whole. I don't think I ever wanted to go off on my own. I couldn't believe that there was something that we could all build each other up and make it better simply by participating in it. So I was hook, line, and sinker for this shit.
And so at what point do you decide you're going to start teaching, or how does that come about?
Nick wanted to create a class at the Annoyance for women, and he wanted me and Jody Lennon to teach it. And I couldn't understand why he didn't want a people class or why I couldn't teach just people. And he said, because I feel like the women at the Annoyance are very powerful, and I want you to support women making strong choices. And I said, okay. So that was my first class, was at the Annoyance. I went to Sharna and I said, people like Miles Strauss, for example, had started, 5 years after me, and he was teaching there. So I said, I would like to teach for you. And she said, oh, no, you have to coach first. And I thought, but Miles started, and then I just stopped myself and I said, oh, yeah, you want me to coach first? So I coached 3 teams at the same time, which is almost impossible. I did not perform in that year and a half where I coached these 3 teams. I tried out the weirdest kind of shit on these people. God bless that generation for handling me, because I made up the weirdest fucking stuff. And then I handed Sharna 3 pieces of 11 by 18 lined yellow paper with my exercises on it, and also my pitch to her why she needed this class, because, computers were for pussies. And gave it to her, and she didn't argue, which means that her revenue stream in classes went up 25%, because she only had 3 classes at the time. So that's how level, I guess, at the time 3 began, but now it's level 2. So that's how I started teaching for Sharna. But it was about as massive a tryout as you have to have. I mean, I did nothing that year and a half but just coach, and that's just a lot of work. And I'm glad I did it. Something in me, I think it was more of a fuck you to her that made me work so hard to do that. But I don't care. The results, I didn't say I set myself out to be a teacher. Never. Because teacher burnout is huge. So, as I know now. But at the time, I didn't think that's something I wanted to do. It was something that was offered to me, and then something that I fought for.
And
God,
who are some of the students? What's that?
I'm a horrible interview.
No, absolutely. Well, look, at the end of the day, just to remind you, this is just a recorded phone call. You're cool with that, right?
Oh, way. I mean, sure. I
yeah.
mean, even if you give it to the prison population, it'll give them something to listen to, sure.
Right, absolutely. And I'm not drinking Fresca right now, but would you be okay if this was brought to you by Fresca?
I love Fresca. Yeah.
Okay, good. Eventually, I'd like to do something with Fresca. But, who were some of the students who in the 3 different teams that, you were coaching that you remember?
It was, it's interesting. It's a certain generation. Jason Shin and my ex-husband, Joe Canale, Stuart Ranson, a bunch of those guys, Tim Chittister. There was just definitely a generation of them that I was working with. I think Julian Jester was in it. A bunch of people. I mean, 3 teams worth. But that's what I remember off the cuff.
Now, it's interesting because for the most part, one of the kind of unspoken rules in the comedy theater world in a city is that you can't teach for 2 different places. If you teach for one place, you can't teach for another.
That's true.
But you were like the only person who was able to have taught for the Annoyance and IO at the same time. Second City as well? And Second City, right. So, I mean, how does that work in terms of like, people taking your classes? Is it just they don't care?
No, I'll tell you how I broke that wall, because that was a rule. That was a Sharna rule.
Right.
Where she said, if you teach for someone else, you can't teach for me. And I said to her, but the Annoyance is a completely different bitch than IO. At IO, I'm teaching character, environment, and teamwork. And because that's the stuff that I created. When I'm at the Annoyance, I'm teaching, I'm sure it's implied anyway at IO, but I was teaching people how to make powerful choices in an uncensored venue, which is a different gig than IO. The whole thesis of the Annoyance is different than the thesis of, excuse me, but I'm on the phone, which is different than the thesis of Second City, which is social and political satire. So I felt like I was adjusting my curriculum to speak to empower each building and that it wasn't just this is the Susan Messing shit show, deal with it, you know what I mean, no matter what building I'm in. I changed it up.
So what would you say is the thesis of The Annoyance and I.O. if the Second City is social and political satire?
Well, if Second City is social and political satire, and look, anybody could tell me at any point, you know, all these institutions are burned to the ground, so I don't know anymore. But I would say The Annoyance is about uncensored content, and it's about protecting content simply by the nature of walking in the building. And that might change as well. You know, it's a different world now. But that's what we felt like then, that normally you need to protect, let's say, adult content per se with a late night time slot. You know, but at The Annoyance, walking in the building, we're saying we're going to find a way to protect weird, odd, strange stuff. And that wouldn't be any less integrity-filled than what you would call at I.O. intelligent comedy, or as Del would say, playing to the top of your intelligence and group work, because The Annoyance gave no shit about your Harold and your group work. And The Annoyance at the time was creating original musicals and plays through improvisation, which actually, you know, by the time everything was shut down, people were just writing scripts now and staging them. So that wasn't necessarily, just because it was our thesis in the beginning, doesn't mean that's where it landed up. I mean, my show always was improvised, but that doesn't mean that's everybody else's had to be. So The Annoyance kind of expanded and changed through what, you know, well, so did I.O., so did Second City, everybody changed. But at the time, it was a response to Sharna, I think, from Mick, with Sharna saying, that's not intelligent comedy. And Mick was saying, who are you to declare what is comedy and who are you to declare what is intelligent? So that somebody could run around in a circle and say muka, muka, muka for 4 hours, and we'd figure out a way to protect that too. That you were doing something simply through the joy of it versus this is through the lens of intelligence. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. When I got there to Chicago, I mean, I came to Chicago for one reason, and that was to take Michael McCarthy's Writing for SNL class.
Oh, my God, I was married to him.
Yes, I heard, and luckily so. And, you know, and I loved Michael, and it was a great class, but I didn't have an agenda. But then I just kind of fell into I.O. because I went and saw the Southern Comedy Challenge. I saw Dave Pasquazi and Tim O'Malley and Tim Meadows on main stage and Ian Gomez, so I was also inspired by that. But back then, it seemed to be like you were either I.O. or Annoyance, you know, and no one wanted to work at Second City because we thought they were the establishment. And so
that's interesting. That's what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what I thought. And we really, resisted it. I was like, we don't want to work at Second City. We want to do our own thing. And The Annoyance was kind of their own thing. And, I regret, as much as I have any regrets at all, but not studying with Mick and going and doing stuff for The Annoyance, because I was lucky to be a part of a group called The Family, and we just started playing every Thursday, twice on Friday, twice on Saturday. So,
yes, by then you guys were the house team.
Yeah.
And The Family was fantastic, and The Family was obviously the precursor for UCB. I remember.
Yeah. And then, but Judy Blume happens, where you get somehow the rights to It's Me, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Is that right?
No, I did not get the rights.
How did it happen?
Mary Scruggs, the late brilliant writer Mary Scruggs, who was a friend of mine from Northwestern. I had lived in LA for a little while and done something on the stage, maybe it was Bang, where I did some sort of reading for the Dickie Bell Twist Dance Party, a bunch of guys I worked with. And I did this reading of Judy Blume stuff, and I remember having like a very, I played it wrong. But I just couldn't. It just didn't leave my brain. I was like, this didn't work what I just did, but I'm not going to drop this. So when I went home, I talked to Mary and I said, I would love to adapt my 3 favorite Judy Blume stories for the stage. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Deanie, and Forever, which was the sexy times of your teenage world books. And I said, that is what I want to do. I want to adapt it for the stage. So we did. And I spent a month in her basement just laughing my ass off with her, where it really was a blasted cut and paste and slash and burn. And then I talked to the Annoyance and I said, look, we have a show here. We could get in a lot of trouble for it. Even then I knew, because we had just done a Real Life Brady Bunch. And Sherwood Schwartz came to see, the creator of the Brady Bunch, Sherwood Schwartz came to see it. And he realized that we weren't making piles of money off of it, that we were simply trying to keep our theater open, and that it was a great show. And so he gave us the rights for $1. And so I kept thinking to myself, okay, maybe this will happen with Judy Blume. But I remember saying to Mick and Mark Sutton, who were running the theater at the time, I said, we could get in a lot of trouble for this. And I guess high off of our Sherwood Schwartz Paramount Pictures adventure, these guys went, go for it. So we did. And it was, I had no idea. I mean, I directed it and created it and adapted it with Mary, but I directed it on my own. And then I remember thinking, even the night before the show, Dana Goodman said, is this good? And I said, I don't know. Like, I had lost all objectivity the night before, and I just said, play it straight. And opening night, it just caught on like wildfire because everybody loves Judy Blume. How could you not? And then it became one of those shows where people lined up, around the block, and it became this big deal. And at the time, before the internet, you belonged to a clipping service, and Judy Blume belonged to a clipping service, and we were getting amazing reviews. So Judy Blume's lawyer threatened to sue us, and then Judy Blume came to town to see it. We offered to send her to Chicago and said, look, just come and see this. We're not, we mean well. And she came to see it. And Second City, I was on main stage at the time, and Second City gave me the night off to intro and outro the show. And Judy, after the show, loved it, and she said, what do you want from me? And I said, I just merely want to keep it open if it's okay. So we paid some sort of legal bills that they had, and also every year I give a hefty donation to the National Coalition Against Censorship in her name. And she let it continue because she had found out about it. But what saved my life was Jewish geography. She said, when she met me, she said, Messing. What's your dad's name? Bob Messing. Who's your dad's best friend? I said, Arthur Nelkin. She said, no. She said, who else? I said, Mike Bambis. She said, yes. She said, I dated your dad's friend. That's why we did not get sued.
Wow.
I know. So we're very lucky. And that really was the first time I thought to myself, this is an idea I have in my mind that will never go away until I figure out how to do it. And then you do it to completion and something nice happens. You don't get sued. So, keep it small. Keep it small.
But along with that, I mean, you created a vehicle for, folks like, Dana Goodman and Julia Roloff to kind of, shine in a way where they may not have shined at I.O.
Yeah, but everybody finds their place. I mean, if Mick hadn't looked at me and said, you're worth it, even though I think you're a pain in the ass, maybe I wouldn't continue doing what I'm doing. For every person who is kind to you, there's somebody else who might tear you down thinking that you deserve, the hard note. And sometimes you do. But I don't think everybody was as much of a masochist as I was. I just kept brushing myself off and recommitting. And now we are in a generation where students are like, fuck that shit. And part of me looks at them and says, yeah, fuck that shit. I kind of agree with it. Why should somebody have to feel marginalized? Why should, the women students have to deal with sexual harassment and bullshit on stage? Why? You know what I mean? I tolerated a lot to be at the table. And again, what I would compromise at age 34 to be on main stage would have compromised me now at age 56 in terms of what I was allowed and not allowed to do. So, because I was censored on main stage in my first review.
How does Second City come about for you?
Well, Second City came about for me after about 12 years of performing and going back and forth after I had done my first pilot in LA years and years ago, I was at a crossroads in my life, and I said, what would be a hard artistic path for me? And I thought, well, maybe going back to LA and seeing if I can be an artist in a place like LA. I don't know. I was floundering. And Christina Dunn Anderson, who had done Second City years before, had said to me, well, what about asking Mick, because Mick was going to be the next director on Main Stage, what about asking Mick if you could be on Main Stage? And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's horrifying. That's the height of arrogance. I don't ask anybody for anything. I don't even ask to do craft services on your film. And you know how my husband, Michael McCarthy, used to kind of give you the balance between art and commerce? I have no balance. I remember thinking, I'm so grateful to be on stage, and I'm not going to ask for anything else. That was just my life. And so she said, well, couldn't you ask Mick? And I was like, oh. And I thought, well, you're supposed to tour. You're supposed to do all those things beforehand. You don't get to go on Main Stage. How arrogant. And so I thought, oh, I'm just going to, I don't know, I'm just going to suck it up and ask him. So I went to Mick and I said, this is going to be the worst minute of my life, and I'm sorry. And it's the worst minute of yours already. I said, if there is a list of people to be considered on Main Stage, could I be put on a list? It still creeps me out even thinking about it. And as I'm saying this, Mick is pulling a list out of his pocket. And he said, I just had a meeting with the powers that be. They bought you for Main Stage. They haven't bought Eddie yet. They put him in Torco, but they bought you. And I went, what? And all of a sudden I was on Main Stage. So I felt like it was, be careful what you wish for, because it was terrifying. The follow-through was fucking terrifying.
So he'd already made that decision when you asked him?
Yes, because he said to me, Mick had said to me earlier, what would keep you back in Chicago? Because by then I was going back and forth. And I said, I guess an artistic challenge would really keep me in Chicago. A challenge would always keep me in Chicago. So I didn't know if that meant making another play or, I guess Judy Blume had been on my mind at that time. As a matter of fact, I had been adapting it at that point. So I don't know what I was thinking. But it was certainly out of my normal skill set. I don't normally take that risk. I do not. That was just very bizarre. And that is how, I guess he was thinking the same thing I was. He was thinking if Susan is going to stay in Chicago and I'm a part of her world with the Annoyance. I thought even if Mick had said to me, would you like to be in an Annoyance show? I would have gone, sure. You know what I mean? Like that would have been as challenging as anything. But walking in a building, obviously having studied it, but not my forte was not creating sketch comedy. My forte was improv, at the time, I guess. So, it was crazy because again, I never saw myself there. I never thought there was a space for me. And when there was, I was like, wow. And I really loved my cast too. They were a great, great cast. It was the hardest, as most people will say, it was the hardest and best job I've ever had. And maybe some people will not say that, but for me it was.
And how long were you there? And you said you were mentioning earlier that first show you didn't feel kind of, Well, the first show I was brought into Kelly's office, and of course Kelly wants to protect his building, and he said, I am concerned you will go Annoyance on me. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, because that meant to me uncensored content. And he said, yeah, I'm worried you're going to go potty blue on us. And I went, okay. He goes, so you can't do that in your first show. You can't do any of that. And I said, okay. So that meant, I'd watch scenes where like Tellerico's going down on Kevin Dorff in a scene, and I'd be like, oh, that looks like fun. And then I'd be like, oh, you don't get to do that. And I actually created a scene called Slut, where everyone goes blue around me, and I don't. So I thought, I just kind of fucked with the system a little bit. But I did apparently whatever Kelly said I did. And please understand, I want to honor the stage that I'm on. So I don't go, I can't believe you're making me do this. I thought, okay, flex other muscles and prove that you can follow the directive that somebody is saying that you need to follow. So I did it.
And after the first show, Kelly said, "You did exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much. And now you can do whatever you want." Because I don't know why he decided now I have license. The building was the same. But the second show I did, surprisingly, I felt even more constricted as opposed to less constricted, strangely. It was the 40th anniversary show, Second City 4.0. The first one was The Psychopath Not Taken. And by then, Nick was not going to be the director. Jeff Richmond was going to be the director. And most directors would pull up the people that they want to work with. And I knew that Angela Shelton had done like 6 different, I think she had worked on ETC. Maybe she had done Detroit. She had done a million different places, and she was in ETC then. And I knew in my heart that Jeff was going to pull Angela up, and he should have. And because I'm not a Jeff girl, I would have liked to work with Jeff, but I didn't have the opportunity. They gently retired me, and they were very kind about it. Very, very kind about it. And it was great. I'm grateful to be an alumna. Very grateful.
And who were some of the folks in that cast that, in Psychopath?
Psychopath was Rich Tellerico, Kevin Dorff, Stephanie Weir, Tammy Sager, and TJ Jagodowski and me.
Wow.
And then,
wow.
And then the second show that I did, by then TJ was having trouble with, I don't know if it was an inner ear. He was definitely suffering from vertigo. And that's when Eddie Furman came in and took over for TJ.
Wow. And so you retire from Second City. You stay in Chicago, though, and you're back to teaching.
Married.
You got married.
Married.
How did you and Michael meet?
Well, first I got married to Joe Canale.
Oh, right. Let's not forget that.
I got married to that guy. I made a lovely child. We had a horrible divorce, but now we're great. We're fantastic with each other, especially because he's a parent in Los Angeles and I'm a parent here. No, Joe's great. And Michael McCarthy, I had known him, I guess, since I had started. As a matter of fact, I'd even done a pilot production with him at the Improv Institute. The precursor for Comedy Central was a network called the Ha Network. And so I did a pilot that he was in. He might have been on Main Stage at the time. So I'd always known Michael. And actually around 2006, 2007, he was back in Chicago while I was teaching at I.O. He came back to do a radio show at Q101, The Morning Fix. And I remember asking Kate Duffy what was up with him. And she said he's going through a divorce. And I was like, fuck that. I won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Nobody touches somebody going through a divorce. No. So years later, in 2011, he contacted me and he started texting. And within 2 days, he sent me a text that said, "Stop farting around, messing. Life is short. We should be together and you're perfect." And I was like, well, we could take it slow. He said, "Sure, we can take it slow, but I'm going to marry the fuck out of you one day." And so he married me a year to the day that he said that.
Wow. What's interesting to me about Michael is, he always kind of played by his own rules. He went to Saturday Night Live, but then was willing to come back and be on Main Stage.
No, he was willing to come back and be in Torco.
Right.
No, he has dyslexia. He did everything backwards.
Yeah.
He was 24 as a writer on SNL. And then I think he stayed in New York for a while, and that's when he was doing Sesame Street and a bunch of other stuff, and then came back because he was Second City's first intern in 1980. They never had one before. So he was the one who compiled the first 30 years of their stuff. So if you look at an old script and there's a lot of typos, but it's typed, that's Michael. He did it all.
Wow. And so you're in Chicago. You and Michael are together. You're teaching now at the Annoyance, Second City, and Improv Olympic?
Yes, because I created their level 2 curriculum. So I figured if somebody's going to teach Doublemint Twins get fucked up the ass, it's going to be me. Although I trained other people to teach them that too. I was doing a lot of teaching, also for the school at Steppenwolf and DePaul University and the University of Chicago. And Then Michael got sick in 2018, and I just dropped everything. I think I made 5 phone calls to the 5 major institutions I was working for and said, deal with it, and just dropped everything. And I was also doing my show, Messing with a Friend, which was in its 11th year. And I was
Yes.
doing it every single week.
Tell me how that comes about.
That comes about when you have an infant and you are separated from your husband, and you realize the most that you will be able to perform after doing, I used to do 11 different shows a week all over the city, and then I was doing 11 different shows a week at the Annoyance and thought I was cheating because I was in one location, and then I was doing 8 shows a week at Second City, and now I'm really cheating because it's only 8 shows, and down to nothing. And I thought, if I was only allowed to play once a week, what would I want that to be? And I thought I would want to play with the people I never get a chance to play with, people I've always admired or miss or whatever the case may be. Some of them not even improvisers. And I would just see what that would be about. And calling it Messing with a Friend, even I remember even then feeling it was like the height of arrogance. And that was a show that played at all 3 theaters as well, because it started at the Second City. They had an Unhinged series every Tuesday and Wednesday. So it started there in the ETC, and then it traveled to I.O., and then it landed when the Annoyance finally got home again, on Broadway again. That's where it landed. That was really where it should have been always. But, I mean, I was happy to play wherever it was. That show played in all 3 theaters.
And who was the first person you did it with?
The first person I did it with, it was a duo. It was actually 2 people. It was Lisa Lewis Garman and Alex Fendrich. They were my first night. And that was also the night that a guy named Jack Farrell, who was in my class at I.O., almost died because he had a ruptured aorta. That's what killed John Ritter. And he had that in my class. I remember he was doing a scene about dancing on his mom's grave or something. And then he went into the hallway because he wasn't feeling well. And Jet Evelis was training with me to teach my class at the time. And so she went to check in on him, and she said, hey, could a couple people take him to the hospital? And I said, no, if he needs to go to the hospital, leave him exactly where he is, because I thought he was having a back injury. So I was like, don't move him, call 911. And that night they thankfully had one of the best surgeons at Illinois Masonic and saved his life, but they had to put him in a coma for a month. So that was the first night of Messing with a Friend.
Wow.
Yeah. You never forget your first time that someone almost dies in your class. Yeah.
Well, I was lucky enough to play with you one night at I.O.
No, I played with you. I played with you at your own theater. That was exciting.
Right. Maybe I'm thinking of an Armando we did together at I.O. or some night. But yes. You know, it's funny. It all kind of, I don't know, the memory of it. I just remember having a great time. I remember just, I always think you're so smart and so funny. But I just remember, holding on for dear life in that show because, you do, chutzpah is a good way to put it. You just have such confidence and, you listen and you just, you go wherever the person you're playing with goes.
Well, yeah, because I'm nothing without you. It's Messing with a Friend. It's not messing alone in my living room. That was a 5-night deal. I remember just you giving me absolute, you just gave me just full out permission to do what I wanted for 5 days. So I played with 5 different people, and I played with Jody Lennon. I played with you. I played with, I think, Bob Colhan, and I played with Scott Adsit, and I think Christina Gaussis. So it was a 5-night gig, and I really, really enjoyed it. Enjoyed your space very much. And as a matter of fact, I'm sad that you're leaving Simple Studios, because every time I was in New York, that was where I taught.
Yes, alas, everything that has a beginning must have an ending. And, Simple, that's it. It's 11 years and 127 months, but apparently landlords didn't get the memo that we're all in this together. So it goes.
I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, look, to me, I look at it as there's real life stuff that you've been through, in your life. And then there's this, so this is it's just business. It's just business and it's life. But it's not a health issue. It's not a family member being sick. It is what it is.
I get it.
But so, like, the people you've taught, I mean, the amount of people you probably taught in terms of, like, who've stood on your shoulders, that must be a nice feeling, all the people you've touched, the candles you've lit.
Aw. It's so interesting now the way that, I mean, everything is adapting, and I sort of love that, because I think initially my goal was, to give someone a positive experience for 8 weeks. I didn't care if they wanted to be famous. I didn't care if they just wanted to feel better when they had to give a presentation at work. I didn't care. For 8 weeks, I simply wanted them to prove to themselves that they had it in them, and if they were on stage, they belonged there, and they did, and they worked extremely well together. So anything I get after those 8 weeks is just dessert, So it's not even. I consider myself an artist? ? I don't know what I consider myself now. Everything's changing so much. But I think I've never taken teaching lightly. It was never just another two on stage. It was always really important to me to know who they were, at least for the 8 weeks they were in front of me, like even their names. I remember the teachers that didn't know who you were. You didn't like them. I don't know. There were just certain things that you could do to help respect the process better and make sure that somebody didn't leave my space scarred. You know what I mean? I wanted them to leave happy, and I hope they did. And I hope I continue to do that, and I hope that I end up growing, because God knows they've taught me a lot more than I've taught them.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I talked to, I'm just kind of doing this thing organically, going from, I talked to Sharna, she mentions you, and so I talked to you. But also, I talked to Kay Cannon, who wrote Pitch Perfect 1 and 2, and she said, I didn't get it until I took Susan Messing's class. And then that's when it really kind of clicked for me. And so I was like, wow, and I was like, Susan should know that. And that's very cool of Kay Cannon to say. And so that's, and I'm just kind of going through when, like I said, this thing that I'm doing is born out of the pandemic. I don't know if I would have been somebody to reach out to people and similar to you and say, hey, can I talk to you for a while?
I think it's wonderful. The fact that I got to talk to you is a luxury. You know what I mean? To get to connect with you is a luxury. So I'm very grateful that you picked up the phone and called me, Holly.
That's kind of you to say. That's kind
of
you to say.
Even now, I have to say honestly, English is not even my first language right now. I think we've all been so isolated, and as much as what I'm going through, it's only part of everybody's surreal experience right now. You know what I mean? Everybody's going through a very weird hopefully self-reflective time, using it at least wisely while you're freaking out,
Well, I go back, I think it was Churchill who said, don't let a good crisis go to waste, and so I'm trying to utilize this time. And like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with these. And at this point, my benefit from it is just getting to talk to people like you. So whenever I figure out how to post it or put it up or whatever, that time will come, I guess. But right now it's just a phone call. And in fact, I use an old-timey handheld receiver that I plug into my iPhone to give me that feeling of calling a friend in high school.
Aw, do you have the squiggly cord that you can chew on?
Yeah, exactly. And it plugs into my iPhone, and I hold it, and I just, I talk like I'm in my, room in high school. And I, was lucky enough to have a phone to call friends after dinner.
Oh, ours was in the hallway, but the cord was so long you could just kind of bring it into the room.
It was, yeah, that's how it started. And then eventually I think they got some kind of like, what do they call it, the cordless phones.
God, don't you remember when pagers first came in?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
My voiceover agent said, you have to get a pager. And I'm like, I don't want you to find me. And she said, do you want a job? And I went, okay. I've always gone kicking and screaming into whatever the next thing is. technology based, I'm pissed off.
But you've also gotten a lot of, you had that pilot you did in L.A. You do a lot of voiceover work, correct?
Not anymore, no. Apparently, I don't think they like the sound of my voice in St. Louis. I don't think.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it's still there for me. I mean, again, if you put it in front of me, I'm going to eat it. If you suggest this might be something I'm good for, chances are I'll probably do it. Because there's got to be some sort of benefit in it. But I've never said I want to do voiceovers. I want to act. Like I said, I do want to act now, I guess. But again, it wasn't a goal. I think my goals were very simple, which was simply not to be kicked off stage. It really is, and I still feel that way. We all have imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And it's interesting you said. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just saying it's interesting how you said earlier how you did the Southern Comfort Comedy Challenge at Second City under the flag of Improv Olympic. And then, Joyce said, well, you're not working for Second City, but eventually you got hired there. Did you enjoy, you seem like someone Joyce would love.
Joyce always knew me. Joyce and Cheryl always knew me. Again, when you're a little Jewish girl and you see, older Jewish ladies, they're going to be nice to you. I don't know. I mean, the community always knew each other. We were very small then. So everybody knew about everybody else. Everybody was in support of whatever they were doing in their own buildings, even if they didn't support the building themselves. Like you said, you didn't want to do Second City. That was your fuck you. You know what I mean? And then what happened? You ended up doing Second City. You were in ATC when I was on main stage. You were gunning for a ping pong table.
We got one.
I know you did.
So, did you ever study with Martin DeMott?
I did not study with Martin, but Mick was a Martin guy.
Right.
So, and Martin was certainly a lot softer than Mick was, and in many ways, his whole kind of thing was, you do the hokey pokey, you turn yourself around, and that is what it's all about. And I don't know if I could have sat in that, but I did love him as a person. And I know a lot of people are big, big Martin fans, and I'm sure that I gleaned a lot of the positive kind of spin-off of Martin through Mick.
Yeah, I never studied with Martin. I knew of Martin. I mean, and again, it's because I was Sharna and Dell, and there was kind of like, I don't know, an arrogance of like, I don't want any other teachers. I just want to be taught by them. I don't know why, just stupid. And then Martin was kind enough to go, I know you just got hired in Turco and you never studied at Second City, but if you want, you can take my class. And, it's just that, I don't know, just not wanting to do it because you wanted to be pure to like, it's just silly.
And it's silly that people would act that way because my main stage cast was everyone had studied at IO in my cast. Everyone. Mm-hmm. And it was very odd to be an annoyance person on main stage. I think they felt that they were taking a big risk with me. And I remember thinking, I don't want to cause shame. So I remember my table manners, very much so. More than my creation, I was worried about my table manners and that I'd be somebody that would not be a problem.
Well, I remember when, from the family, the first person to get hired was McKay. And he was among the first who never studied at Second City and kind of broke that idea that you have to study at Second City to perform at Second City. And then Horatio, and then I got hired in terms of we didn't take your classes, but they still put us on stage, which I think was a big step forward for them because there is commerce and art. And you want to be able to say, well, the people who take classes here perform on our stages.
Well, there was also a purity at the time, though, that feeling of I don't want somebody to say that I sold out. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there was something of that nature. And even at, whose funeral was it that Besser got up? And was it Dell's? I think it was Dell's. we had some sort of memorial service at Second City, and I remember Besser getting up and making some sort of pronouncement that, he's Sharnos or he's IO, he's not Second City, like kind of like taking away the decades that Del had worked for Second City. Like, he's ours now,
Yeah, it's interesting because for us, we went to see My Thing of Love at Steppenwolf with Laurie Metcalf, and it was Actors Day, like Wednesday at 2. And we thought you had to bring a headshot. So we all brought our headshots, and then they were like, you don't actually need your headshot. That's just Actors Day. You just tell us you're an actor, and you can come see it for free. So then we were driving back in Ian's car, and someone jokingly said, half jokingly, but was like, we should drop our headshots off at Second City to audition for their Turco. And that's kind of how it happened. Me, McKay, Horatio, and Ian went to see that play, I believe. And we drove by Second City, and Ian ran upstairs and dropped off our headshots.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Yeah. Because we were so...
Again, I don't care if it's youth and anger and, and just kind of chutzpah. Why not? I mean, people... Probably a lot of things that I've done, I just haven't censored myself and said, you know what, I have to do this. I just have to do this. And then you do it.
And so, you've performed with a lot of people throughout, your career. Are there people who stand out to you who you're like, wow, being on stage with them, I had to hold on because they were great at whatever, without naming too many names or leaving people out, but
I'm not
off the top here.
Yes, I do, because the one that you say, hold on to your hats, the Detroit Improv Festival, and I had jokingly said, they had said to me, who do you want to play with next year? And I said, I don't, because I'm always trying to think of who's already in town or who's already doing it. And I said, I'd like to play with Sam one night, Sam Richardson one night, and I'd like to play with Tim Robinson. And they went, okay. And I was joking. I was actually joking. Again, I'm joking. And then apparently they sat in meetings and said, Susan wants this, and so they made it happen. Those poor guys were filming Detroiters at the time. They were exhausted. They were over it. And I could see both of them going, seriously, do I have to get through this? But I had a lovely, languid, beautiful show with Sam. And the next day it was Tim that made me hold on for a second, because that guy came out of the gate so fucking fast and serious and perfect. I thought to myself, oh no. And I watched him for a second. I went, wait a minute, join him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because he was already light years ahead of me. And I was like, fuck. And then we played together. But he was someone who made me hold on for my life. There are people who make it very, very easy for me. Someone like Scott Adsit is always with me. Like, he's always with me. He's just fucking brilliant. Timmy Meadows was like playing with butter. I miss Ike Barinholtz. I miss him a lot. He and I used to play a lot. And he would just fuck with me and I would fuck with him back. There's just great stuff. Pretty much almost honestly, I've learned something from everybody I've played with, so it's really kind of rude. Nick is another hold your hat, because he'll fuck with reality so hard it'll make your head spin. Everybody has been great. I played with my ex-husband. He's great. I mean, honestly, like people are good. People are good. I can't even. Rachel Mason, I've played with Rachel more than anybody else on the planet. There's two Rachel Masons. They're spelled the same way, but the Chicago-based Rachel Mason. She and I were touring together a lot, and she's done Messing with a Friend more than anybody else. So,
So, as we talked about a little bit, IO is closing after 40 years. The Annoyance may not have a space. Second City is, going to come back because, they have the largest financial chip stack. But, what do you think is going to happen now in Chicago with, the IO was who knows how many spaces,
It's a really interesting, I guess I should be freaked out by this, but I'm not. Because I feel like, if the world is burning down to the ground, why not us as well? I feel like on the pro side, people who have felt marginalized, LGBTQ plus and BIPOC, I believe that their voices are going to be heard. I think comedy is going to take a major shift. I don't know. So far, improv is not pleasing me on Zoom. I don't know if it ever will, and that's okay. But I will adapt to what it needs if I continue to teach. Somebody said to me, what are you going to do? Just politically correct short form? And I thought, well, that's kind of a glib way to say it. I don't necessarily believe that to be true. But my hope is this. My hope is that people don't say these major institutions have to all just change. I think that people will start getting strong enough to feel that they can create their own collectives and decide what the future is on their terms. Because it's easy to criticize any institution. You've been a figurehead and running your own major theater, and you know that someone is always going to be upset about it. Somebody's always not going to like the way it's run. And I believe that a lot of great theaters have started because everybody's told everybody else to fuck off. And maybe that's what will happen. I don't think it's going to be a utopia right away. I think when you make a lot of demands on people will say, oh, okay, and then I don't know if they will change, but hopefully people will listen now. I do know that these institutions, as good in many ways that they can be, have missed the mark, decades of missing the mark on how do we make it more inclusive for everyone and how do we make people feel safe and within the structure. So, out of ashes, come little baby trees. So that is my hope. My hope is that people will be happier, that people will feel like that they have more of a say in the creation of their own artistic fate. People are very good now at declaring what their agendas are. Again, I did not have an agenda. I still don't have an agenda. And in the beginning when I started, having your own agenda when you were doing group work was considered like the worst thing you could do. Going off and doing your own thing, even when I went off and did a pilot, I just kind of kept it to myself. You know what I mean? Judy Blume, I remember when Mick, I was on main stage at the time when Judy Blume was blowing up, and Mick said, you do not mention that show in this building. And I said, okay. I got into the, what was it? Remember when they used to have the HBO Comedy Aspen, what was that, the festival in Aspen?
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Comedy Festival in Aspen. I got into the Comedy Festival in Aspen. I remember getting off the phone and going back into rehearsal at Second City and not saying anything about it because I thought it was weird to brag about your own accomplishments or to say what your accomplishments were. So even now, it's kind of weird when I go off on my own and do my own thing. I always feel, I don't know, like it's disrespectful, and I know it's bad thinking. It's not right thinking because people should do whatever the fuck they want.
Now, why did Mick say not to mention it? He thought Second City might be jealous?
No, it's just that's not the annoyance. And this is you're at Second City right now. That's your job. That's your focus. You don't go around and talk about shit you're doing in other places. And I honestly, at the time, it made a lot of sense, and it still does. I mean, it's just that I feel like I've squelched a lot of things like even when you just kind of list things that I've done, I'm thinking, yeah, I've done them, but there's so much more that I have to do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to rest on my petty accomplishments at this stage of the game. I've got a lot to learn. This is like a lifelong process.
And so when you say you've got a lot more to do, what is it that you want to do? Like, if you could wave a magic wand for yourself, what would it be?
It's a good question, Ali, and it's the hardest question in the world to ask. People do what needs to get done. There's a book called Henderson the Rain King by Saul Bellow, and the king is sitting on his throne, and he says, I want. And everybody says, what do you want? You're the king. You can have whatever you want. And he says, I don't know. So here's my thing. All I know is since Michael has died, he'd be very pleased with this. I've been writing a lot. And I'm definitely at a crossroads, and I understand that I should be, again, more in fear of what the future is going to bring me, because, again, the major places that I'm working for have been burnt to the ground. But I'm not nervous about it, but I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. Maybe I'll be a teacher. I don't know. I hope to still perform. I don't know. I want to create stuff. I don't know what that is. But maybe it's also because my husband's just died and my brain isn't working well and we're in the middle of an international pandemic. So I'm not exactly sure. But I'm gonna sit quietly, get high a lot, and figure it out.
And what kind of writing are you doing right now when you say you're doing a lot of writing?
Well, when Michael died, he left me over 50 boxes of everything he's ever written. Everything. Like, everything. And, you know, I know he trusted me with his intellectual property. And this is the first time I've even said this out loud, certainly publicly, because for 2 years I didn't say shit. I let Michael kind of talk about whatever he needed to talk about on social media, but I said nothing. I just put my head down and tried to keep him alive. But going through a lot of his stuff, I discovered more about Michael that I had known through his lifetime. And so I'm not just mourning my husband, I'm sort of mourning the man I thought he was. And so I'm figuring out a lot of stuff right now. Right now it feels like I'm just like spewing poison. I don't know what I'm going to do with all of it. But it's weird. I would advise all comedians, if I could say to all of you comedian men or anybody, all comedians, clean up your side of your street before you die so your spouse doesn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So Michael was a lot more complicated than I thought, and so I'm figuring out a lot of stuff for me in terms of, you know, my love and relationship with him. And again, you know, I'm certainly not interested in vilifying or demeaning my husband, but I would say that I'm also not interested in making him a saint. He was a complicated man who really did want to learn some things and help people. That really was his thesis. But a lot of the stuff that I'm reading will probably affect no one but me. But I've got to handle that. I got to figure that out right now. A lot.
Yeah, I mean, he was a prolific writer, so, I mean, you know, he had some kind of work ethic to just create nonstop writing. I mean, 50 boxes.
Over 50 boxes. And it's everything he's ever written. And I don't, for every original Sesame Street script, there's a 29-page annulment application. There's something else in there. So it's not like I can just go to OU and say, hey, would you like my husband's papers? I do have to look through all of it. And when I do, I find a very candid look at his life where I see a lot of themes, you know, if you call them a pattern game, as it were. There's a lot of themes in there that I am just learning about right now. And so it's a bizarre and surreal experience to kind of not be able to ask him after death what he meant by that and just kind of discover more information. He's a complicated feller, and and my goal is I don't know what to do with it. I think what I'm doing is I'm really taking more of an inventory about myself, but he is certainly a great part of that.
Mm-hmm. And was he writing every day when you guys were together?
Yeah, Michael, even when Michael was sick, all of 2018 and 2019, one of the reasons why we put lifts all over the house, because even though he had cancer, he had a glioblastoma in his spinal cord. He really foremost had a spinal cord injury, and people don't know how much he really, really struggled. And so I put lifts from the first floor up to our bedroom and from our first floor to the basement, because I wanted Michael to make sure he could get to his office, because that's where he felt the best, and that's in the basement. And he wrote every day. He would drag himself down to the basement and still write up until the very end. He has 4 books right now that Howard Johnson is editing for me, that are pilot production sitcom spec, SNL packet, and talk show packet that he worked on doggedly. You know, I mean, just he was a writer, and he was a solitary creature, and he really enjoyed that. And so Michael really did, I will say this, he really walked his talk as a writer. So when he says to people, you know, create a sacred space and really take that time to do these steps, they actually really work. Because writers write. They don't talk about being a writer. They write. And he always had a million ideas, and, you know, but this guy suffered from OCD and dyslexia, so of course he's going to pick the hardest job in the world that you could pick, which is being a writer. I want it for that. Yeah.
A lot to unpack, both, you know, literally and metaphorically, you know.
I think especially because, again, I knew my husband one way, but when someone is quietly writing about what their life really is, that's another person. Mm-hmm. And again, I believe he trusted me with this. So I'm just going to be, you know, thoughtful in the way that I handle it. But that might be leading me to my next artistic place. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier about teacher burnout. Did you feel that? Was that happening for you?
Right before Michael got sick, I remember thinking, I am on a gerbil wheel. It was never when I, for example, once I got into class, I'm 150%. Like, you will never get anything less than the best of me. And the best of me that day, I don't know, might not be so great, but it was definitely the best of me. But I felt like I was on a gerbil wheel. I was teaching. Things were out of balance because directing and teaching and performing, for me, it was kind of a combo platter, and I was kind of a jack of all trades. And when it tilts into one direction more than another direction, I always tend to notice it. And so I was feeling a little burnout. I was feeling a lot of burnout. Yeah. And then Michael got sick and it all dropped anyway, so it didn't matter. The summertime usually was insane for me. The summertime is like I'd be teaching all week and then traveling every single weekend, and that's just not happening this year. So even to have that space to kind of, like you said, if you could wave a magic wand and what would you want, and for me to still come up with, I don't know, in this quiet space, you know that something's going to give at one point. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Again,
you know,
not worried, but not sure. You know, because improv, with what we do, you could see how it helped you be a better businessman. You could see how, you know what I mean? You could see how certain things fed into other things. I became a better actor simply by being an improviser. I was like, oh, now I can act. You know, because improv was the doggy door that got me there. So I feel like, you know, improv, they always say the applications of improv are so much, you know, they help police officers be better police officers and caregivers be better caregivers. They help Alzheimer's patients stay in the moment. When I had to teach for Zoom, I taught a class in China, I sat down for a second and I thought, oh, fuck, what am I going to do? And within 2 minutes, I had 6 new exercises. So I know that I will be able to figure out how to be creative in this brand new world. I'm just not sure what that is yet. I just don't know. You know, I always write to it with a gun to my head, but now I'm writing, so go figure.
You know, you were a founding member of The Annoyance. Would starting another theater in Chicago be something that interests you?
I don't know if the Susan Messing House of Yuck Yucks is going to work. Mm-hmm. Although it would be a really funny place. I never saw myself particularly as a business person, because when you say, oh, I'd love to start a theater, I'm saying, yes, that's great to start a theater, but that also means, you know, you have a heavy responsibility now, especially now, because once you know better, if you're going to take on a role of status or, you know, whatever that is, you're going to have to do a better job. That's just all there is to it. And I'm not sure if I am that person. I certainly am there to support everybody's creation, and I'm excited for everyone. I that doesn't seem like it's a driving force for me right now. I don't see myself starting my own space. I feel like my job is to support other people's spaces. And again, I might be wrong. I don't know. Catch me in 2 years when I start the Susan Messing School of Yuck Yucks.
Well, I mean, I love Chicago with absolutely all my heart, and you know, and I just any chance to come back to Chicago, I do, and my heart breaks for Chicago with when I hear about not only the violence but also the demise of comedy theaters and performance arts space. And I always said when people said, "Are you ever going to go to Chicago?" And I said I would never go back to Chicago as long as IO was there. I just wouldn't compete with Sharna. I wouldn't want to, So, I mean, I don't know. I always think about, I always thought about L.A., I always thought about Chicago. So I don't know, but then again, I just don't know after what's going on in New York if I have the stamina to do another build out and do what it takes to start another space.
Well, it's kind of interesting because weren't you dealing with North Carolina as well?
Oh, that's still happening. We have a space in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and
right.
but again, it's shut down. It's we've got to figure out how to make it survive. It's it's a large space with a large monthly bill, and I don't know if there's enough people to support it financially, and definitely not now with COVID. So time will tell. But if I'm not a slave to the moment, it's very easy to get anxious.
I get it, and I get it. Yeah, it is disastrous right now for all live theater. Theater as it is right now, I don't know when that's going to recover. And I mean, look, we're not. Do you feel comfortable sending your kids back to school? I don't. I'm not going to. Even if they made us, I wouldn't do it. Not this year. Not until they figure out a better plan or we get a vaccine. But even then, maybe, you've dealt with such big spaces. Maybe this is going to be back to where it was, where everything was like little storefronts for a while. It's like you only eat what you can chew. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like once we started getting our big ice cream factories, of comedy, and we did it because things grew at such a crazy ass exponential rate. Like, you're just like, holy shit, I don't have more space for my classes. We are going to have to expand. I'm sure that's what happened with IO. Even the Annoyance, I feel like the Annoyance grew only as much as it could afford. But in COVID, it can't afford that, even that, because the Annoyance isn't huge. It was still very manageable. I feel like the short term is that it's just crumbled. The short term is, what is that? Was it called Paradise, where everything, Paradise, California, where the whole city burned down, the whole town burned down to the ground, where everybody looked and they said, this is all I know, I'm not leaving. And I'm like, you're living in a FEMA trailer right now. You're living in a tent. And they're like, yes, we will rebuild. And then they will look at fire codes and they will look at, what will happen. Why do people still choose to live in the, this was 20 years ago, this was lava. You know what I mean? It's like, why are you building on lava, on hardened lava? But you do. People come back. And so my hope is when people do come back, they will be able to start small, only because that is what they can afford, and that when people grow, maybe they'll grow a little more conservatively so that business and art can coexist in a way that feels palatable. I mean, I know Sharna, she just had so many things on her plate, she didn't even know half of what was going on in LA. You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean you don't know what's going on in your business? But it's just so big. There's only so much one person in charge of all of it can do. And I'm not going to say that everybody made great choices at the times that they made it in any of the buildings, but they did the best with what they knew at the time that they knew it. And now that they know better, they hopefully will come back. If they choose to come back, they'll come back, with a body of information that's invaluable.
You know, and I think to me when I, look at all this, it's making my family very anxious that we little by little are surrendering businesses. And this one at Simple Studios is the first I have to surrender, and that's what they call it, but I'm not making up some term. But to me, I'm like, we have to look at what it brought us, in terms of the friendships, and you have a lot of very strong friendships with, Rachel Mason, Rachel Hamilton, and other folks. So, I mean, the gift it's brought you is something that they can't take that away.
No, they can't. This community, as large as it's grown, it's still small. I feel like the comedy community, and I'm including stand-up, I'm including a lot of other stuff, I feel like ultimately, it's weird. When it comes to something like death, though, I will say this. I got to go on the sidetrack for this. When Michael died, and he had the luxury to be able to die at home, thank the fuck Lord, he died at home in hospice, and it was peaceful. And the guys came to pick him up after he died, and one of the guys took a look around at my house, and he said, "It's so nice to come to a peaceful home." And the implication was that he spends his day in a refrigerated truck, unzipping body bags and checking toe tags. This is his normal. So this was almost abnormal. And then I realized that all the rituals that come with death and change have changed. That when you go on Facebook and somebody said, "My brother died," or "My sister died," or "My mom died," and it, no matter what it was from, everybody's like, "Sorry," and then they kind of move on because there's only so much sadness and horror people can absorb. But even with that, I have felt that my community, and not just my smaller friend community, but the community of people I've taught, the community of people who've taught me, that my friends from Northwestern, my friends from high school, our friends from all over the world that we've had the luxury of meeting through our art. Once we know each other, we really do know each other, and we're invested in each other. And your sadness would be my sadness, and your happiness I celebrate. And that's my hope, in a world where up is down and down is up, is that this kindness that on every day, on these small, tiny, tiny, beautiful ways that people have shown me through Michael's sickness and through growing pains and whatever I've gone through, people really do have your back. And it's hard to reach out and say what you need. And sometimes people can read your mind, and sometimes you have to say, "This is what I need," because that's difficult for me. But when I have either had to say it or people just have read my mind, people have shown up, and I am rich in good humans. We are rich in good humans. Because here's the thing, Ali, we still know each other from over 30 years ago, and it's just catching up. Do you know what I mean? I even remember do you remember when you went through your top hat stage?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for those who don't know, you used to wear a long black Columbine coat and your big boots and your hat. And I remember it was this kind of persona you put on for a while. And I would talk to you, but I would talk to you, even though you'd talk to me in persona, I would talk to you like you were not in persona. And then I would ask you a pointed question about 4 times until you would answer me as Ali. And I was like, there you go. I just talked to Raj a couple of weeks ago, and if this were not COVID times, I'd be on a fuck tour 2020, and I'd be like, baked on his couch for a week. Just what I said to him. He said, "As soon as this is over, Susie, come over," because it's just what I would do. It's probably best that I'm not. It's probably best that there's COVID, because I might be on fuck tour 2020.
But I mean, also, like right now, you have the luxury of being able to, you can go wherever once COVID is done, but you can travel and, do your thing, wherever you want. You have,
once my daughter is in college, she has one more year of school here in Chicago. I can do what I want where I want. That is true. But again, with all that kind of freedom for the first time in a very, very long time, where I am not tied down to a specific responsibility for, even the luxury of not, like when I was when I went up to Northern California, just recently, and again, I would not travel. I would not choose to travel except for an emergency. But I feel like I slipped in and out of that too. Rachel Hamilton was there and to save my ass, and so was Paula Killen. It was Grease Camp, they called it. And they said, so if you could do whatever you want, what do you want? And I said, I don't know. Maybe I just want a tiny house in the middle of the Redwood Forest. I don't know. But I'm excited about it because I don't think I'm done yet. And I'm,
yeah.
I mean, for 2 years, all I like I said, even speaking out loud on something that's taped for God knows what it is, I don't care. But although I wish you much success always, I haven't spoken this much out loud in over 2 years. Like I haven't, just haven't. I've been busy. I let my husband. When you have cancer, the narrative. There's very little you can control when you have cancer. And I thought to myself, well, one of the few things Michael can do is control his story. So, I'll post some pictures of him, but I'm not going to say anything. This is his journey, and I'm grateful that I just shut up and let him have his journey.
Well, I mean, maybe that in and of itself, or me calling you or talking on the phone together, again, who knows if this actually is recording, because, it's an app.
Might not.
It might not be, but I think the value of it, for me is I get to talk to you and you get to talk to me and I get to hear your journey. And if it did record, great. And if I do post it, awesome. But I mean, that to me is icing on the cake. The cake is, I feel blessed that I get to call someone like you, this morning and say, can you do this thing? And you're like, yeah, let's do it tonight. And also, you've also, you've done a pilot for a sitcom, so you've been in those environments. I mean, you auditioned for SNL, correct?
Yeah,
right.
I did.
So, I mean, you've had these moments where it's like you were right there. And so, to me, if you've been right there, you can get right there again if you so desire. And one of the things I believe Marianne Thebus, who I love, my acting teacher in Chicago from the Center Theater, I think she said, roles you're right for, you cannot escape. Ones you're not right for, you'll never get. And so that's kind of been my journey in terms of the roles I've gotten. There's no way I could have not gotten them. I couldn't have escaped them. And the ones that I wanted and didn't get wasn't meant to be,
Well, here's the good news about me. I've never been hired because I'm young or I'm pretty. Michael was feeling well in January, so I auditioned for a commercial where Jane Lynch was going to be Illinois tourism spokesperson. And I haven't seen Jane in over 20 years. And I got to see her at the callback, and I was like, Jane, I come up to her belly button. I'm so happy to see her again. And I had looked at copy on both of the scripts, and I was just this little distraction person in it where I would kind of poke my head in where I wasn't supposed to be, and Jane would be like, get the fuck out of Dodge, but in a funny Jane sort of way. And it was for one spot. And I noticed in the other spot, they had another kind of person who'd be doing the same thing. And I looked at the scripts, and I thought to myself, if Jane keeps telling some errant person to go fuck off, she's just going to look mean. You know what I mean? And so I said, this looks like a runner to me. And, I don't want to be an asshole, but if you want, you can hire me for both spots. I mean, I was joking. I was, again, joking. And I get a text from Jane later saying, whatever Susan Messing wants, Susan Messing gets. I got both spots. And got to hang out with my friend. And got to do stupid shit for 2 days. And it was lovely. So I feel like what I know now might be in support of the process, whatever I land in. And I certainly know the most talented human beings in the world. I'm never going to run out of things to make up. And I do know that I still do want to improvise. I do know that. I could see myself back on stage one day. So that'll be very interesting to see that first night back. But I'm excited about it because I like the fear. I play into the fear. Because when you were saying even that you were holding on for dear life with me, I'm like, fuck you, I've got Ali. You know what I mean? It's gonna be a shitstorm of joy. Let's go for it, you know? So I'm always very excited to see who I meet and what I get to do. And hopefully I'll be of service in some way. And hopefully it'll make me a better human being, which is certainly a big goal, because I'm a young soul. And I got a lot to learn, and I don't want to be a shitty role model to my kid.
And how did you and Jane Lynch know each other?
Real life Brady Bunch at the Annoyance.
Right.
She played my mommy. She was my mommy. And honestly, again, you catch up where you left off. So we had just 20 years. We had to sit in a hotel room and talk for a couple hours, and like, boom, we're there. You know what I mean? I feel like everybody we've ever. There's so few bridges that I have burned because I don't know. I value people maybe even more than they value themselves. But I've burnt very few bridges. So, and I really honor the people that I know, and I hope they know that. And you know, so my hope is that we all get to collaborate again one day, and I think we will.
And, you know, because this is a jumping around this, you know, conversation, you know, Real Life Brady Bunch, I mean, to me, that's another seminal show, you know, the creators of it, you know, you, Dave Koechner, you know, the people that were in it. How did that come about?
Well, I don't even know if Koechner might have been a guest star on it, but he wasn't in the cast.
I thought he played Mr. Brady.
No, that was actually the original Mr. Brady was, Andy Richter was Mr. Brady in New York.
Oh, right.
I think he might have been Mr. Brady at home, too. Home being Chicago because of tours. It was Jill, who's now Joey Soloway, so I want to make sure I use the proper pronouns, too. At the time, it was Jill Soloway and Faith Soloway were hanging out with Becky Fire, and she did a perfect Marsha Brady impression, and they said, oh, we should really do this for real. And so they cast me as Cindy, and Nick was the original Bobby. Pat Town was the original Greg. Melanie Hutzel was the original Jan, and Becky Fire was the original Marsha. Ben Zook was the original Bobby. Jane was our mother. Mary Weiss was Alice. And so we did a show at the Annoyance called the Real Life Game Show and the Real Life Brady Bunch. Eric Waddell did the game show portion, and then we'd do the Brady Bunch stuff. And it became a crazy hit. And it sort of created a lot of old shows being brought on stage. Like I think somebody was doing the Real Life Star Trek, the Real Life whatever, you know what I mean? So that kind of started a kind of a 1970s kick too.
Hello?
I'm listening.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So how did it end up going to New York?
I don't know if it was Ron Delsner was whatever the promoter, and he, I guess, wanted to bring it to the Village Gate, which no longer exists in New York in the Village. And so a bunch of us went there. I was probably the only person to come back to Chicago. Everybody else sort of started doing new things and then ended up in L.A. But that's how it landed in New York. And because I'm from the East Coast, I thought it was a good idea for me to go because I could see my family as well. So, and it worked out very nicely.
And is that how the SNL audition came about?
My SNL audition came about from a show called the Miss Vagina Pageant. That was another show that Jill and Faith directed together. And again, I just want to clarify that Jill Soloway is now Joey Soloway, and that their pronoun is they. They're non-binary. Because I want to honor that as I learn. So we created a show called the Miss Vagina Pageant, and that also caused a lot of heat, I guess the kids say. And Lorne Michaels and Quincy Jones came to see the show, and then some of us were invited to audition for SNL, Betty Cahill and Melanie Hutzel and I. And Betty Cahill and Melanie Hutzel got the show. So that was exciting, too. But again, that was a place that, again, I never thought I'd be at Second City. I never thought I'd be auditioning for SNL. I auditioned for SNL, 9 years before I was on main stage, 8 years before I was on main stage.
And it seems like Mick is somebody who both performs and directs. I mean, when I talk to folks, I forget about how much performing he did, wearing both hats.
Yeah, a lot. He's a jack of all trades. He's a performer, teacher, director. Yeah. Mick is very, 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 very funny and interesting to watch on stage. Fascinating to watch on stage. Fascinating.
And so, like a theater like the Steppenwolf, that's also closed now. Steppenwolf, Goodman, those theaters.
Yes, and I kept thinking to myself that when they come back, theater has changed so much anyway in terms of being cost prohibitive in so many ways that, for example, my friend Christopher Donahue, who lives in my coach house and does a lot of Mary Zimmerman shows, and he's a brilliant actor. Every show he's been in for the past few years has always had a secondary site. So if he did a show at Looking Glass, he probably then had a run in San Diego. You okay there? You sound like you're underwater. You okay there?
No, I'm walking around Simple Studios while we're talking.
Oh, got it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You have good art there.
I will. I'll miss the art as much as anything.
I know, but it was a great place, and it still is until you have to leave it. What were we just saying? I don't remember what we were just talking about.
The Goodman, the second space.
Yeah, so I thought to myself, I knew that the Steppenwolf, once again, they have a big concrete ice cream factory. That's what I call the big buildings, concrete ice cream factories. Mm-hmm. But they were ready to go to another expansion, and I think all equity insurance is running out at the end of August or something really bad. And so my hope is that maybe certain theaters that are on CAT schedules, like you're a CAT 99C theater or you're a whatever, that some of them merge together, because maybe there's a little more strength in the power structure that comes together. I don't know. I always thought like maybe Goodman and the Steppenwolf should fucking merge. Maybe like some of the smaller theaters should merge and make it more of a collective. Maybe it would be a little less cost prohibitive. I don't know. But Chicago is a city of process, and it's a huge city of theater. And right now it's very scary times for creators.
Well, in New York City, one of the things they've kind of, it seems like, resigned themselves to is Broadway's not coming back till March of 2021. They kept pushing it, I guess, just try to keep hope alive. But now I think the reality is setting in.
It might be longer than that.
Really?
Look, as long as there's some dumb fuck who decides to, go to a bar in Daytona and then kill his mother from COVID because, it's a hoax, until you see that kind of apology Facebook post where somebody says, I thought it was a hoax, and now my mom's dead, so wear your mask. Until people really come on board, or until science catches up with this is going to continue in this way for a very long time. So I'm hopeful that our administration and that we get someone who is sound of mind and respects science in there, and that things can change. But right now, my hope is that it gets better, but I don't think it's going to happen soon. I have resigned myself to my daughter spending her senior year online, senior year of high school. And she goes to a performing arts school. Can you imagine the arts classes?
When you think of when I think of a carpenter's toolbox in terms of measure twice, cut once as their credo,
yes.
Or an electrician's of, treat everything like it's hot, what would be yours for improvisation? What are the things that are your touchstones that you use before you go out there?
Oh, you mean your little mantras people say? Well, it's funny because I always say to people, if you're not having fun, you're the asshole. So that's me before the show. I'm like, oh my God, I'm such an asshole, and it's my show, and it's my rule. I'm such a fucking asshole. Thanks for being my friend. I'm going to kill myself. And then my desire to create supersedes the weirdness I have to go through in order to create, and I get off again. So I'm excited. I'm always excited to kind of have my hypocrisy rubbed in my face, like, and to see what I can do with it. So, that's one. If you're on stage, you belong there. I don't know. I mean, I have to talk myself in as much as anybody else does. I fight fear all the time. But again, my desire to create is going to supersede the weirdness. So I'm willing to go there. I guess that's it. That's all I can say before I get on stage. I don't even do warm-ups. George, you're going to have to sit. Come on. The dogs are going to go out, and they're looking at me like I'm an asshole. You got to sit, George. You got to sit.
Well, I mean, I could talk to you all night. I don't want to keep the dogs. They have to go out, right?
I'm not keeping them. I can take you with me. I'm taking you with me.
All right, let's see if we you don't cut out on the phone.
I doubt it.
It's interesting because I don't know. Chicago seems like a dream now to me. That time, it was so much innocence, so much just golden age of so many talented people doing this thing, and just almost seems like I don't know. I just was not awake, and then now I am awake enough to know that I'll never be fully awake.
I get it. I get what you're saying. We sort of took it for granted because it was a party while it was art, and like if you're gonna have growing pains, you might as well do it while you're laughing the whole time. Like art. I mean, these were our formative years,
But it's also to me, today it was finally announced that the Washington Redskins are going to change their mascot and team name. And once something like that,
what's the name?
They haven't come out with it yet. But my point being is once that happens, you're like, it was racist all along. I mean, I knew it was because I'm a brown person and I'm an immigrant. So to me, as a resident alien, because I was a resident alien before I was a U.S. citizen, so I was always had an outsider's perspective. Things like that always seemed to me to be strange. I was like, this is strange. This name seems derogatory. There's so much to me that was like, this is weird,
Right, right.
And even when I went back to Chapel Hill in the late summer of 2017, there was a Confederate statue on campus, and I was just like, this is weird. Why is this still here? But when I went to Carolina, this statue called Silent Sam, I didn't even know it was a Confederate statue. I just thought it was like a Revolutionary War statue, and the rumor was when you walked by it, if you were a virgin, the gun would go off in his hand.
What the fuck?
But that's how unawake I was to not even know this statue was Confederate, because I was too busy chasing the ghost of Belushi in Animal House.
That's right. That's right. That's hysterical. But again, we only know what we know at the time that we know it. I mean, when women students kept saying to me things like, sorry, I'm just dealing with dogs here. When I was dealing with when students would say things to me like, I don't want sexual harassment in class anymore, and it certainly wasn't happening in my class, but when women were saying things like, gosh, I just want to go to class. I don't feel like I should have to be harassed or be texted all night. And I was like, no, you shouldn't have to. And I'm thinking to myself, but what I tolerated, in my life in comedy, I just thought you had to suck it up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You just sucked it up. And now people don't suck it up. And I'm going, no, you shouldn't have to suck it up. Even, you know what I mean? Of course being harassed is wrong. But I was like, well, if I make the women stronger performers, then they won't get harassed. That was my stupid. Because, you know, I was like, again, what I would do to be at the table at a certain age, I wouldn't do now. But these women are taking a shortcut. And I'm like, that's a good shortcut because they shouldn't have had to ever take the long cut.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've learned my epiphanies are stupid and slow.
Right. But it's good to have them and be open to them now, you know.
Of course.
You know, because
it should never have had to been that. But remember, when you're the only woman in the room, or the only black person in the room, or the only Hispanic person in the room, or the only disabled person in the room, you there's a part of you that feels, well, I guess I'm in the room, and this is what I have to do to stay in the room. And other people are saying, well, fucking create our own rooms. Or we'll wait till you burn it to the fucking ground in your own stupidity, and then we'll tell you how to do it right. So, I mean, my daughter doesn't tolerate shit that I absolutely tolerated growing up. And I'm going, good for you.
Mm-hmm. And does she want to be an improviser as well?
Shit, she's already fully formed. She's a better improviser than all of us. She's better at everything than all of us. I mean, she's amazing. And I don't say that because she's mine, because it's, you know me, if she were hateful, I'd be like, she's cunt city, but I love her. She's amazing. She's got a voice of an angel that makes people cry when she sings. She is already funnier than anybody I've ever met, but her funny is more like my dad's. It's dry, it's understated, it's perfect. It's really great. And she was, you know, she was raised by comedians and doesn't even, like, it's just her normal. You know what I mean? So she doesn't, I mean, she's just starting to realize, holy shit, my babysitters are, like, really good comedians. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Well, I mean, you know, I hope to see you again someday in the IRL, you know, in the real world. And be able to play again someday on stage somewhere.
Ali, we will meet. I can guarantee you this, because we're saying it, we will meet again on stage. And this is just a matter of time, and we'll fit it out. And if you come to Chicago, you always have a place to stay. Always, always, always. I got a lot of room for you.
Thank you. Well, Susan, I admire you so much. I think you're so smart, so funny, groundbreaking, and inspirational in how much you've done. And you know, I always tell people when, you know, in New York City, you know, in the pre-COVID years, you know, when I'm trying to run a theater, you know, and it's in the real world, and people were teaching here and they wanted to teach elsewhere, I said, well, the only person I know of who gets to teach at more than one theater that I know of is Susan Messing. I don't know how she did that, but she gets to teach at IO, Second City, and The Annoyance. But, you know, I'm just doing what was done or was told to me, which is if you teach at two different places, how is it possible, you know?
Well, doesn't each place have a different thesis? That was my thing. I was like, because I remember people used to complain about it, but I was also not, and I was not in a place where I was going to say to somebody that to deny them employment. Silly to me, right? I mean, even the focus of the pit in UCB and the magnet, those are different focuses, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, you know, the way it was told to me or taught to me is like, if you work at McDonald's, you can't work at Burger King. If you work at the Apple store, you can't work at the Microsoft store. So that's how it was kind of explained to me. But, you know, I don't know anymore. I don't know. And I don't know, you know, I don't know.
I don't, again, you know, until it's put in your face, I think one thing that we'll learn in the future, which is kind of cool, is that we get to set our own rules now. That it's not, well, this is the system that was in place, so this is what we're going to do. Now, as somebody who runs businesses, you can kind of decide, well, you know what did I never enjoy? You know what I mean? Can I get that out of there? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I really, right now, it's, you know, not that I ever knew what the future held, but I was probably lulled into thinking I did. I more than ever have no idea what the future holds, for both what I oversaw and myself and my life and my family. It's just ever changing. And that's why I have to just stay positive about health, because true wealth is health. And you've, had people in your life that you loved, and helped them, pass from this earth. So, It was a lot. I remember right before Michael got sick, my sister Bonnie died, and then she died in December of 2017, and then Danny Breen, our best man, died in the end of December 2017, and then Michael got sick at the top of 2018. So I really haven't dealt with a lot of shit, you know what I mean? Because I was like, I'm too busy now, and I know you have a lot on your plate right now, and I just hope you don't look at it as one big chunk, because if you look at it one big chunk, I can only imagine it being so overwhelming, because you've done so much and you've expanded so much. You did it on the right mark, and you're an amazing business person as well as an artist. So I just hope that as it's dismantled in the way that it needs to be, just to make sure to keep yourself, safe and above the water and all that good stuff, that I just hope you take it one step at a time. Anything you need, Ali, I'll always do for you. Always. I mean, if nothing else today is also a call for me to say to you, Ali, I'm here for you. As my father always used to say, your slightest bitch is my command. Thank you. And likewise, Susan. So grateful to have you in my life.
I love you. I mean it. I hope we're in the same homeroom next year, and I hope it's not staggered seating.
Yes, and if it's hybrid school that we both go to, hopefully we're at school on the same day.
I do hope we're in this. I hope we're in the same day, but they're going to probably take our homerooms and separate them for lunch. So, and I've really enjoyed sitting with you at lunch. So I'm just
let's figure out.
Find a way to make that work.
Well, if they start doing every other person and we know they're going around the circle and they're counting odds and evens, let's just kind of look ahead and see how it can be odds or evens, whatever they do it.
That's a really good idea. So don't sit next to me.
All right, Susan. I thank you for your time. I love you. All the best to you, and thank you for doing this.
You let me know what you need. I love you so much. Thank
You're an inspiration to so many.
You are. I love you.
Thank you. Good night, sweet princess.
Bye. Bye.
Wow. So fun. 2 hours, 7 minutes flew by talking to Susan. It just, I just wanted to ask more questions and talk to her, because, I don't know who else has done, maybe there is, I'd have to look it up, but the Annoyance Founder, IO, Second City, teaching at all the different places, all the people she's inspired. Like I said, when I talked to Kay Cannon, the writer of Pitch Perfect 1 and 2, she said Susan Messing's class was when it kind of clicked for her how to do it. And, the number of people she's played with and who play with her, because she's just that good, considered one of the all-time great improvisers, And what I like about improvisers is it's a term for humans, not, actor or actress. And I think now it's even actor now that, but an actor, but an improviser. But an improviser to me never had a gender associated with it. That's what I think I loved about it, because you were just an improviser. No matter who you were, how old you were, what color you were, I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive, your gender, but I guess from me, I was just surprised that I was welcomed into this world for someone who'd really never done it before in a kind of professional way or a class way. And I always felt to some degree to be an outsider, being an immigrant and being a resident alien before I was a, U.S. citizen, but a citizen of the world, of the global village. So I thank her for her time. Such a fun conversation. And to talk about Michael McCarthy, too, because, again, his class at Second City that he, when I called up to find out if they had any classes, and after I had my epiphany that I wanted to write for Saturday Night Live, if I'd called up Second City and they said, yeah, we don't have any classes, no writing classes. But when I called up Second City to see if they had any classes, I talked to a gentleman named Joffrey, And Joffrey said, yes, we've got a phenomenal class starting in November with a former SNL writer named Michael McCarthy. And so him even teaching that class was the reason someone like me flew to Chicago November 1st, 1990 to start studying sketch comedy writing. And 9 years later, I got to write for Saturday Night Live at the 23rd anniversary season. And that's made all the difference in my life. And really, when people ask me how it happened, I go, I got lucky, meeting the right people at the right time. If it weren't for SNL and Lorne Michaels, I wouldn't have a home in New York City. And if it weren't for Dick Wolf and Law and Order, I wouldn't have been able to start the Pit. That's how I got the initial money to start it. If you're still listening, which I can't believe if you are, bless you. I hope it's because you're on a walk or you're driving or, maybe listening to it late at night like I used to listen to Larry King late at night in my room. I thank you for your time, and I hope this finds you healthy, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, sweet dreams. Wherever it finds you, I hope it finds you healthy. And if you're not healthy, I hope you get healthy. And once you get healthy, I hope you appreciate your health, because true wealth is health. And I count my health, I count my wealth by my health and by my friendships that I have, that I'm able to call these people and have these amazing conversations. So invest in your health and invest in your friendships, because those are what will last the test of time. Because right now I sit in the office of Simple Studios in New York City, and I'm going to spend the night here because at 8 a.m. tomorrow, I'm meeting a couple of people to begin to get 11 years of stuff out of here as we surrender the space. But sometimes you have to surrender. If you don't surrender, you may die. And so it's letting go. And I am feeling all the feelings of letting go of Simple Studios and putting all this stuff elsewhere for now. And, I don't know. I just feel like I want to spend the night here. I think I've done it before, but not in any kind of memory that I can remember. But I don't know. The space has done so much for me. I've loved it so much. And we shall see. We shall see what the future holds. Okay, enough. I've gone too far and too long. So take care of yourself, and I hope we get to meet in the real world someday. Spread the word.
Thanks for listening to Global Comedy Studios. Is this a bad time to talk? Stay tuned for more.